Hello students, so today we're going to do the question answers of Toba Tek Singh by Saadat Hasan Manto. Question number 1. Who was Toba Tek Singh? Toba Tek Singh is the main character of the story. He was a Sikh who had been admitted into the asylum in Lahore for 15 years. His real name was Bishan Singh, but he was called Toba Tek Singh after the name of his hometown. Where is the setting of the story Toba Tek Singh? The setting of the story is in a mental asylum in Lahore, Pakistan. Where, according to a regular reader of Zamindar, was Pakistan? According to a regular reader of the Urdu daily Zamindar, Pakistan was a place in India known for manufacturing cutthroat razors. Question number 4. Why were the lunatics being transported to a different country? 3 years after the 1947 partition, the governments of India and Pakistan had decided to exchange their lunatics in the same manner that they had exchanged their criminals. The Muslim lunatics in India were to be sent over to Pakistan, and the Hindu and Sikh lunatics in Pakistani asylums were to be sent over to India. What were the concerns of Anglo-Indians in the European war? The concern of two Anglo-Indians in the European war was whether the European war would be abolished and whether they would get measly chapatis instead of bread as breakfast. Who is Rup Kaur? Rup Kaur was a daughter Toba Tek Singh left behind in his hometown when she was just an infant. At the time of the story, she is a striking young girl of 15. Question number 7. Where, according to one of the lunatics who considered himself God, was Toba Tek Singh? According to the lunatic who considered himself God, Toba Tek Singh was nowhere because he had not taken its decision till date. Question number 8 is a very important question. What is the significance of referring to the bit of land between India and Pakistan? The significance of referring to the bit of land between India and Pakistan as Toba Tek Singh is that it represents those people who did not believe in the partition. While religious fanaticism had divided people into Muslims and Hindus on two different lands, there was a section of people who believed that home is where the heart is, and they did not want to belong to India or Pakistan. They believed that home could not be associated with any piece of land. It was not a label, but rather had to do with a sense of belonging. Manto had said, Hindustan had become free. Pakistan had become independent soon after its inception, but man was still a slave in both these countries. Slave of prejudice, slave of religious fanaticism, slave of barbarity and inhumanity. The land also symbolizes a no man's land. Also in the story Tetwal Ka Kutta, the dog is killed mercilessly along the Indian-Pakistan border since both the countries failed to claim him. This reaffirms that the bit of land stands for a liminal space. Now coming to paragraph questions. Question number 1. What was the event that upset the inmates of the lunatic asylum? The event that upset the inmates of the lunatic asylum was the 1947 partition. They got bewildered or confused with the India-Pakistan rigmarole, and they could not understand the concept of partition. They could not understand whether they were currently placed in India or in Pakistan. Also, the governments of India and Pakistan had decided to exchange their lunatics just as they had exchanged their criminals. The Muslim lunatics in India were to be sent over to Pakistan, and the Hindu and Sikh lunatics in the Pakistani asylum would be sent over to India. The very idea of transition scared them because, firstly, they could not understand the concept of India-Pakistan partition and where they were exactly placed. Some of them who did not want to go anywhere started mimicking the leaders of the movement. The writer, through the motive of madness, tried to signify how the whole concept of partition was actually a farce. Question number 2. What is the significance of the change in the nonsense phrase that Bishan Singh utters? The significance of change in the nonsense phrase that Bishan Singh utters is that he replaces the phrase Government of Pakistan with Toba Tek Singh, the name of his hometown. Though it appears to be gibberish to the onlookers, it may be seen as lack of communication on part of others, as he does not agree with the Government of Pakistan in their policies. It can also stand for the policy of any government. This gibberish symbolically stands for the lack of communication, for the government could not perceive what the people of India and Pakistan actually wanted and where their hearts were actually placed. Question number 3. Why did one of the lunatics want to make his home on a tree? One of the lunatics wanted to make his home on the tree because he could not understand the whole concept of partition. Leave alone placing himself along with India or Pakistan, he could not understand how these titles came into being. The fact that he wants to make his home on the tree is significant. The tree has always been linked to nativity and the idea of one's roots. If one is firmly planted in a place having strong roots, it is difficult to displace someone from their home or place of nativity. The idea of nativity has always been associated with being strongly rooted to the soil. If a plant is being transplanted to somewhere else, it cannot exist or its growth is soon stunted. Here, people are being uprooted from their homes rather than being transported to their homes. This is why the metaphor of the tree is significant here. Who was the Hindu lawyer? The Hindu lawyer was an inmate of the asylum who had gone mad because of unrequited love. He was deeply pained when he learned that Amritsar, where the girl he loved lived, would form part of India. He abused all Hindu and Muslim leaders who had conspired to divide India into two, making his beloved an Indian and himself a Pakistani. When the talks on the exchange were finalized, his mad friends asked him to be happy so that now he could go to India. But the young lawyer did not want to leave Lahore, for he did not want to lose his legal practice in Amritsar. Question number 5. Why couldn't anyone explain where Toba Tek Singh was? Nobody could explain where Toba Tek Singh was because they could not understand the concept of partition. They themselves were caught in the dilemma of placing themselves. They felt a strong sense of dislocation. Moreover, they failed to understand how Sialkot, which was in India, was now in Pakistan. Also, it seemed to them that Lahore, that was now in Pakistan, would slide over to India. They feared that the whole of India might become Pakistan, or whether both India and Pakistan may disappear from the face of the earth one day. In such a context of displacement, where places themselves were displaced, they could not place Toba Tek Singh. How did the transport of lunatics across the border turn out to be a tough job? The transport of lunatics across the border proved to be a tough job because most of them were unruly. It made it impossible to get the lunatics out of the trucks and get them across to the opposite side. It proved to be a tough job as those who had agreed to get down began to run in all directions stark naked. As soon as they were dressed, they tore off all the clothes again. Female lunatics also made a lot of noise, making it a bedlam. The weather conditions made matters worse as their teeth chattered. Question number 7. Why did relatives come stop coming to meet Bishan Singh. The relatives gradually stopped coming to meet Bishan Singh. Initially, his relatives used to come every month to visit him, and he would instinctively know when they would come to visit him and would have a long bath and have his hair done and put on clean clothes. If his relatives asked him anything, he would either be silent or express his regular nonsense of the India Pakistan caboodle. As he stopped coming later, he comes to know from his friend that his family has gone to India safely because once the process of partition had taken place, people were transported to their respective sites as per government policy. Question number 8. What is the function of gibberish in the story? The motive of gibberish has a great role to play in the story. It stands metaphorically for lack of communication. A whole country's people were being divided into two and were being compartmentalized against their very will. Their heart's desire could not be communicated to the respective governments, though it was repeated again and again by people like Toba Tek Singh, who held their homes close to their hearts. In contrast, what seems to be gibberish are the meaningless talks held by the governments of India and Pakistan. The questions that the madmen asked seem saner than the answers the governments were giving. One is reminded of Tughlaq's policy of shifting the capital from Delhi to Daulatabad. In a that is over there, it's not an, it should be over here. In a Tughlaq-like stance, history had seen one of the largest migrations in a context where borders were crossing people rather than people crossing borders. Okay, thank you, and that's all for today.